Hello, Peoria Heights. We're back with another episode of Must See Tower Talk. Come full circle with our guest today. In fact, he was the very first guest on Tower Talk, and now he's our 18th. Most of you recognize Peoria Heights Mayor Michael Phelan, of course, and so we're glad to have him, and he's going to catch us all up on what's happening in the Heights in this really strange yet still pretty exciting time for the Heights. So, Mayor, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. So it's mid-March, and the Heights is booming, and then bam, the pandemic sort of makes landfall in Illinois, and the governor shuts everything down. And so you've got no roadmap for this. So what were you thinking at the time, and how would you describe these last 4 months?
Well, what I was thinking at the time was this is something that probably wouldn't last long, and then we'd be back open for business, and this crisis would pass like all others typically do. Unfortunately, it didn't, and not only did we see a shutdown, but we've seen COVID rear its head again and in the community. So a lot of unknowns, and like you mentioned, there was really no playbook to go by, and really no history as an example of how leaders needed to act and react to the crisis.
So all things considered, how's the Heights weathered the storm so far?
I would say we've weathered the storm very well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this has been very hard on business, and it's been very hard on people who've been put out of work and unemployed by that. What I mean is that I think we were at somewhat of an advantage because for our restaurant part of the economy, in that having a lot of outdoor dining put us at an advantage, and they also improvised. The good business people here improvised and went to curbside pickup. Mm-hmm. So that helped, I think, people get through this. And then as the restrictions loosened a little bit, from curbside to outdoor dining, the Heights has an advantage there. Mm-hmm. So I think we came through it okay, and we as a village government really haven't seen a huge loss in revenue. Mm-hmm. So we're still waiting for this next quarter to come in, but it wasn't as devastating as we expected, and some businesses actually saw an uptick in mm-hmm. business. So if you're in the food business mm-hmm. or you are a retailer, a lot of them saw an increase in mm-hmm. business. And some business owners have told me that even though they were out of business, once they got open again, that they've seen a flurry of business.
Sure, pent-up demand, right? People.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Heights financials pre-COVID, I like to say we're literally hitting on all cylinders, doing very well, and we're back to that norm. Mm-hmm. My fear is that we don't have another shutdown,
sure,
or we don't regress. But mm-hmm. as I sit here today, the village financials are sound. We put $500,000 in the bank at the end of last fiscal year. Over that, we probably won't see that this year, but we're still projecting a surplus. And so
it's been a nice cushion for you, because you really turned the corner a couple of years ago, and you've been running deficits up to that point, and now you're in a surplus situation, and that helped cushion the fall a little bit.
Yeah, we turned around a $900,000 deficit, and as you know, when you don't have money, you don't have room to make mm-hmm. a lot of decisions. Mm-hmm. Your decision making is based around deficits and the fear of what's next, and having a good cash flow, having money in the bank. And by the way, we haven't had to spend any of our reserves mm-hmm. because of the crisis we've been going through. So, and I credit the employees and good decision making, the board, and everyone in the community for mm-hmm. helping make the Heights what it is.
So early on in the midst of all this, you decided to do something for your businesses. You put together the mortgage lease grant program. You're coming out with a water bill rebate. How'd you get around to deciding to do something like that? And do you think that you've made a difference for business?
Well, it really revolved around wanting to give back to the community, both the citizens and the business people who do business here. As you know, a few years ago, the village created a business development district, And because of the success of that, we expanded that business development district last year. So that is a geographic area where there's an additional sales tax collected within that geographic area. And we felt that it was important to help our businesses survive. And we had money in that fund. And frankly, we got very creative. And Dustin came up with the idea of creating a plan that would give up to $1,500 for rent or mortgage assistance for businesses in that area. And all the data isn't in, but anecdotally, I've had several people tell me that literally saved their business, kept the doors open.
Sure. And you did have really good participation, but it's interesting that you did also have some money left over that you can plow back into the business districts.
So that didn't come out of the general fund.
Right.
Again, that
No,
came
that's
out
right.
of the BDD fund.
Right.
We also wanted to do something. What can we do for the residents?
Which is a targeted fund, by the way, so it's apart from the main part of the budget.
Yeah. And then recently the board approved a $20 rebate for all water users. I realize that's not a lot of money, and it's probably not going to have a huge impact on people's lives, but it's what we could do for the citizens. And then one of the next steps is that we're going to be making we're going to ask the board to make a donation to the 2 food pantries in Peoria Heights at an upcoming meeting. So we're trying to do all we can to help people weather the storm and get through it.
Sure. So you lived in Peoria Heights virtually your entire life. So through this period of adversity, what did you learn about your community? I mean, did anything surprise you really in terms of how it responded?
Well, I think we're resilient, and I always like to say that I believe the strength of the village is the families who live here and have lived here a long time, and new families coming in, the people who live here, but also on the business side of things. One of our strengths is that we have attracted a lot of family-owned businesses, and I think they had to get very creative in how we survive the storm. They did. They got creative, and I think that's what helped get us through everything. We've got a good team here in administration. We've got a good board. Can't say enough about the Public Works Department, administration, police, fire. They all helped us through.
So, so nationally, and obviously not just locally, but, across the United States, there was this sort of 1-2 punch between the COVID, and then you had a spontaneous street protest across the country in response to the incident in Minneapolis. And so you get a call one day about trying to get permission to have a march here. So what was your initial reaction to that, and what prompted your decision to participate?
I think my reaction was caution. Wanted to know who was making that request. And very, very difficult times in the country and in the state and even in Peoria Heights. And there was obviously the threat of unrest here. I had a resident contact me about doing a march. And again, being very cautious, I asked if she would meet with me. And she certainly agreed, and so Chief Sutton and I sat down with her, wanted to know what her goals were for the march. And she explained that the goal was to have a safe, family-oriented march that would end with a prayer service at Tower Park. And both Chief Sutton and I, those are goals that we could embrace. And I told her that if that was the case, that I would be willing to walk with them. And I'm proud to say she kept her word, and it was a safe, peaceful, family-oriented event that did conclude with her pastor offering a few words of encouragement to the community afterwards. And so
I was going to say, like you say, it went exactly as advertised, and I thought it was really a healthy event. It went off well. It was a beautiful day. Everybody was great, and it was just nice. It was kind of a nice thing.
Yeah, and
in contrast to a lot of the other protest marches we saw across the country.
people in this country, thankfully, have the right to assemble.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't need our permission.
No.
I mean, they didn't need our permission. They wanted us as partners in this,
Yeah.
so that part was encouraging. But there are people on both sides of the issue who are showing up being disruptive, and
Mm-hmm.
we fortunately didn't have that here.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of upheaval though nationally, and the pandemic, which seems to be making a comeback, and some of the social unrest that we've seen. So, what are your concerns moving forward, and what are you prepared to do to meet those challenges?
As far as coronavirus,
Just sort of the social unrest that's across the country. I mean, there's there's a lot of agitation, and people are concerned about their economic futures too, right? If we go back to level 3, the stage 3 with the pandemic, then those businesses could close up again and all that sort of thing. And I think the uncertainty causes a lot of anxiety. And
as far as coronavirus, I am concerned that we do not regress, but what I would rely on, like I did previously, was what the health officials and the science and people in the medical community are recommending. So that would be the advice that I would follow if we get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I just, people need to, again, continue to maintain social distance, use good judgment, hand washing, all of those things that are being recommended today, so we continue to make progress and move forward. As far as the civil unrest, I think we need to have a conversation in this country and in this community about all the issues that have come forth. But one of the things I want to emphasize is that a lot of those tactics used in other cities, we don't use. Our police department has not used those sorts of tactics or chokeholds at all.
Mm-hmm.
We were one of the first to have body cameras here in the village. Our police chief randomly pulls video from those body cameras and reviews those.
Mm-hmm.
So we're pretty diligent in making sure that sort of thing would not happen here.
Yeah, all in all, there seems to be a pretty good relationship between the police department and the community here. So, speaking of challenges, you and the board have a big decision coming up regarding the future of the fire department here in town with the impending retirement of Fire Chief Greg Walters. So tell us about this meeting coming up on Saturday. What can people expect?
Well, a little backstory to that. So there was a conversation that I was dreading, that I knew the day would come when Chief Walters announced his retirement, and he announced that to me privately quite a few months ago, pre-COVID. And I can't say enough about Greg Walters and the spirit of serving his community. I mean, he is a true public servant, a true hero that is out there every day, working for the safety of the community. So our fire department today, like any organization that depends on volunteers, has a challenge, whether it's in coaching or whether it's in education. No matter what the field, at church or at school, it's hard to get volunteers today for a lot of reasons. People are busy, they're busier today, but the spirit of volunteerism I don't think is as strong as it once was. But also there's challenges, here in the area when there were a lot of people who worked shifts, first, second, and third shift at Caterpillar, at Pabst. There were folks who worked second shift, third shift, first shift, and people were available at all times during the day. And a lot of those locally owned companies were very good about letting their employees serve the community. So I think that's also changed with the loss and lack of local ownership of companies here. So we have had for a while a difficulty in recruiting people to our volunteer fire department, who are a terrific group of people, very dedicated, very capable. Now, most of those folks who are on the fire department work in the daytime. And so Greg, Chief Walters, handles a huge amount of the calls that occur 7 to 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So I'm very concerned, first and foremost, I have some preferred options, but first and foremost for me is public safety. And I'm very concerned when he retires who's going to answer all of those calls. And we're fortunate in today's world that we don't have a lot of fire calls, and that's because of smoke detectors and fire retardant building materials. So we don't have the kinds of fires we did 40, 50 years ago, thankfully. But we always have to be prepared. And so the board needs to address that. So Saturday, administration and I need some direction from the board of what options they want us to pursue. So Saturday's meeting is dedicated to just reviewing what short-term options we have and long-term options, and getting some direction from majority of the board where they want us to go with this.
So talk a little bit about those options, those alternatives. There are basically 3 of them, correct, at this point?
So one option that was mentioned, and I'm not sure based on just what I said is viable, and that's to continue as we are and try and recruit more volunteers. I'm open to that, but we really need a lot of volunteers to get us where we should be. Another option is...
Do you know how many volunteers, by the way, work or help out at the fire department?
I do, but I'm afraid I'll give you a number that's not correct. So that's more a question for Chief Walters.
Okay. But you could always use more. Suffice it to say.
Yeah, we can. Oh, yeah, and especially people who are available in the daytime. So that's really what we need. The next option, and this is what Chief Walters and I, before the COVID crisis hit, as I said, the village was pretty sound financially. We talked about a duty crew, and for the daytime. So that would be a paid crew of people who worked in the day shift. We would still have a volunteer fire department on nights and on the weekends. And that's something that he and I talked about, thought was a good idea. Then the shutdown occurs. The coronavirus shows up here, and so that conversation is put on hold, dealing with everything else. But the clock is still ticking away to Chief's retirement. So,
which is in November.
In November. Some of the board members directed administration to talk to the city of Peoria about a quote for fire protection from them. This is not, by the way, the first time this has been done. This was done, I don't know how many years ago, but a few years back under the old administration, and they were having trouble too back then, getting volunteers. So the board at that time, which was made up a little bit differently, and a different mayor and a different administrator, also approached the city about fire protection. So it's not a first. So we do have a proposal from the city of Peoria, and then another option would be creating a fire protection district, which would be a whole lot more complex. That's maybe doable, but it's more complicated.
Right, and it has a tax district. You see it in a lot of rural areas around Illinois.
Most rural areas have a fire protection district.
Right.
So, there was one here, I think, years ago under Richwoods Township, but due to the annexation back then of large parts of Richwoods Township into the city of Peoria, that fire department went away, and the Heights was left with servicing itself.
Right. And so, what are the factors that are going to drive this decision at the end of the day, do you think?
I think you get a different answer maybe based on who you asked on the board, but obviously to most of us, including myself, the Heights identity is very important.
So autonomy is
having your own police department, your own schools, your own government, your own library, your own fire department is important. That's very important to a lot of us, especially those of us who've lived here all of our lives. But then viability of that option. So what options are viable, and cost obviously will enter into the decision. I would think of most board members, and how are we going to pay for this?
Right. Well, that's a big deal.
And again, I hope though too, as I mentioned when we first started, what's the best when it comes to public safety of the citizens?
Sure. So switching topics a little bit here, how's the long-term comprehensive plan coming? We entered this year thinking that was going to be probably the top news coming out of the community for 2020, and a lot of other things have happened, and so that's, talk a little bit about that.
Well, as you know, the village board is spending quite a bit of money to have a comprehensive plan done for the village, and that's really a deep dive into the community to give us a roadmap with a whole lot of public participation, to give us a roadmap of what the people who live here want the village to look like in 5 years, 10 years, and even 25 years from now, on all things related to quality of life, transportation, neighborhoods, economic development, etc. So, as you know, we started out the year with a whole lot of public participation. We had a meeting at the school, probably had over 100 people. People were showing up, they were engaged, and then we had to shut down. We had to put off a lot of neighborhood talks. We had to put off meetings for public engagement for the process. So now those are getting back on track, and I hope we can catch up, and I think we are, but that's a very important process, so we want people's participation.
And the work has been ongoing with the consultants. I
The
mean,
work never
they've
stopped.
not stopped work. Yeah.
Yeah, the work never stopped. But again,
And there has been a communication flow back and forth.
yeah. But the work centers around information from the public.
Yeah. So, is there anything specifically that you've learned from the information gathering sessions that have taken place to date that maybe even surprised you in terms about the direction people want the Heights to go in?
I wouldn't say any major surprises, but it's been a nice surprise to see people engaged who are new to the community. That part's been nice. It's been nice. We know we have a challenge when it comes to the housing stock. That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges the Heights faces. We went through a lot of years of population decline. That's not only leveled off, I think it's going in the opposite direction, but the challenge is the housing stock. So we have families who want to move here, a lot of empty nesters who want to move here because the walkability of the community, the safety of the community, the quality of life in the community, all the assets that we have as far as green space, library, we're becoming a destination for the arts, etc. So how do we create that supply for the demand that exists? And that's probably the biggest challenge I think we face.
So, even though things kind of came to a standstill in a lot of different places, there has been some ongoing investment in the Heights, and some progress has been made. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the projects that are coming up. I know the pump house is going to have a use here in the not too distant future. We've seen the hotel project moving forward. Why don't you talk a little bit about those two things?
Sure. Well, I think everyone knows about the KDB group and Kim Bleck and staff. That's been in the media a lot, and of course those are very, very exciting projects for Peoria Heights. The alfresco project really excites me. We announced last year that the governor's capital bill, we have $68 million to redo Route 29, Galena Road. Along comes the KDB Group's investment in alfresco, which will be a world-class, I believe, fishery and nature destination. It'll be exciting because people in the Heights, kids in the Heights, need something to keep them occupied and keep them interested and keep them busy, and I think this is going to be a fantastic site that will do that. So those, and the hotel, that's going to provide a whole lot of revenue for the village in a lot of ways. So I'm excited about that. But some of the things that I just think are terrific are during the COVID shutdown, Dustin Allen announced that he's doing a rooftop bar. Mike Vandy is doing a winery right above Brienzo's in Heritage Square. The popcorn shop really excites me at the pump house because I really believe we need more things for kids here who are growing up here. So I grew up here with Ben Franklin and Velvet Freeze, and we really want to create those childhood memories to make growing up here special.
Sure.
I think this is an opportunity for that. This is the public's building that owns it, but the KDB Group is going to put about $350,000 into restoring that beautiful building that we own but wouldn't have the money to improve. A local guy, Pete Clarno, who grew up here, left, returned here, is going to run a popcorn shop and candy shop there. So that I think will be a good fit for Tower Park and the neighborhood. There's a lot of development going on here in a lot of different ways, and it's not just the KDB group. They're getting a lot of the press and the media, but others are out there as well.
So speaking of Galena Road, I know we've been waiting on that money to be freed up by the legislature, but already there's been some work down at Poplar Park. What's going on down there?
The KDB group has come in and at no cost to the village. They volunteered to clean up the park quite a bit, removing a lot of trees and shrubs and restoring the beach. So that's a fantastic park. It's trees there. The view of the river is fantastic.
If you haven't been down there, you should go. It's really been opened up and cleaned up quite a bit.
Yeah, so it's just more public space that we have that could work in support of Alfresco, Bill Felt Park right across the street, Forest Park Nature Center. So, I mean, we have all these assets in the community that not everyone's aware of, but we have to enhance the connectivity too. And incidentally, I was at a meeting over the weekend, and one of the representatives from the Park District said that rough estimates, 2,000 people a day were visiting Forest Park Nature Center during the COVID shutdown.
Yeah.
So a lot of foot traffic there, and that's a fantastic.
Brings a lot of people to town, and
Yeah.
the Heights is a beautiful place with the bluffs and everything, and the riverfront, obviously, that people may not have been as aware of over the years, even though it's obvious that it's there. But and there's talk about putting an outdoor ice rink maybe this winter if it gets cold enough down at Poplar Park, which would be, I think, a real nice draw for people. So.
And that's the emphasis, that space along the riverfront be green and affordable activities for families.
We've talked a lot about, over the last year and a half or two, about the Heights being open for business. And I know you really want to make it a destination for entrepreneurs who have a unique idea or a vision and the wherewithal and the work ethic to try and make a go of it. So are you planning on kicking that outreach up a notch, and what might that look like?
Well, I know people often think that we focus a lot on economic development, and that is true.
Pays bills.
It's true for one reason. It helps us to pay our bills. So I say it many times, the village does not collect a lot of money on property taxes. We pretty much pay for police officers, public works, administration. All of our bills are paid primarily through sales tax revenue. So it's important for us to keep property taxes low and to continue to create a revenue stream from the economy. And that's why we made it through the COVID crisis. That's why we don't have a financial crisis here. That's why we're not looking at laying people off, is because we've got a good local diversified economy. Now, that being said, one of my top priorities, along with housing and bringing people back here to live, is to bring head of household jobs back here. Now, that might not be a company like Pabst that employed 800 people. It might be several tech firms that employ 50, 100 people that have head of household jobs. I think one of the most valuable properties in all of Central Illinois is the Pabst site. And it's valuable for a lot of reasons. It's valuable because of Peoria Heights and our community and the people who live here. We have a walkable community. It's right on the trail. We've got a lot of shops for people to go to and eat lunch, get coffee, and we need to focus on attracting some of those tech companies to the Pabst site, and I think that's very possible.
Right. Good. Well, so there you have it as we wrap up another episode of Tower Talk. It has been a weird few months, but rest assured that all in all, the future in the Heights continues to look pretty bright. Stay safe out there, and until next time, we'll see you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.